folks, welcome to Sketch and Stitch. My name's Billy, and on this channel we cover costume design from concept to construction. Today we're going to start a new series based on hand sewing. So I have everything set up and ready to go. I'm going to show you some essential hand stitches that you would need as a costume designer when constructing costumes. I have all of the supplies ready to go. I have needle and thread. I have a needle twister, which is a modern day kind of pin cushion. It looks like a little glue stick. And so I have all of my hand sewing needles here. Any hand sewing needle will do, whether it's a sharp or a between, or any of those will do for us. Gonna need some snips, so I have some snips to snip my thread. And then what I'm gonna do below is put all of the stitches that we're gonna be doing in the description box, and also put what time in the video so you can jump to whichever one you would like to look at. I hope this helps, and without further ado, let's hop on in. Hey folks, I am ready to start by doing some hand sewing, and I've got our thread ready. I'm using a double thread, which means that throughout my needle I have a double thread all the way to the end, and I'm going to tie these into knots. I'm going to show you a couple methods to tie off the end of your thread so that it's sturdy and holds place. Be sure that you don't pull too much thread whenever you're threading your needle. You don't really want it to be longer than about 1.5 to 2 feet. If you do anything longer than that, you end up running the risk of having more knots and causing yourself more frustration. Okay, so here are a couple methods for tying knots. The first method, what you want to do is you want to wrap it around your finger so you have an X. Put your thumb on the X. Roll it off your finger, and you kind of see it just rolling, and it causes it to twist. You reach above the twist and then pull all of the other end of the thread, and if you've done it correctly, it will make this knot. And this knot it's a real messy knot, but it's a pretty strong knot. For this way, I'm going to take my needle and my end of my thread here. I'm going to cross the thread over the needle like so. Put my thumb on it. I'm going to wrap the thread around the needle 3 to 4 times, and I'm putting my finger right over that thread. So if I lift my finger up, you can see the thread is there, and so I'm going to put my finger over it. I'm going to pull the needle through the wrapped thread to make the knot. It makes a much tinier knot. Our first stitch today is going to be the running stitch. This is the basic stitch. This is, if you only know one stitch, this is the one to know. This is the one you maybe learned from your grandmother, or you took it in home ec. And it's a simple stitch. It's an even stitch, which means there's an even space for every stitch you take. And I'm going to show you how to start it off. I have my thread knotted and ready to go. And what I'm going to do is simply take a single stitch down through the fabric and back up. And I'm going to continue taking those even stitch and space, like so. And these stitches can be larger if you're wanting it to be temporary, or if you're wanting it to hold, you can go much smaller. I made my stitches a little bit larger than they actually would be. You're aiming to do 1/8 of an inch to 1/4 of an inch stitch, and I'm doing a little bit larger so you can see it on here. You also want to make sure you're working just from the front of the fabric, which means that you don't need to flip the fabric back and forth. I'm going a single stitch down and up. For speed purposes, you also could go ahead and load the stitch on here, which means you could do several by going down and up and down and up, like so, and pulling it through. To tie it off, I'm going to show you my tie-off method. I'm going to go back 1 stitch and take a stitch there. I'm going to do the same stitch in about the same spot. It doesn't have to be exact, but you want it close. And this time, instead of pulling the thread tight, I'm going to pull it down until I have a little loop like this. You can kind of see my loop here. And I'm going to go through that loop once, twice, 3 times, and then we're going to give it a little pull. and that will tie off the knot on the end here. Then I can clip the thread, and we are good to go. And this is the running stitch. Okay, so the next stitch we're going to learn is the back stitch. And the back stitch is a much stronger stitch than the running stitch. So I'm going to show you how this stitch goes. So for this stitch, it's much like the running stitch. You're going to go down and up in a single stitch of the fabric, like so. But instead of just going further forward and going down and up, you're actually going to go back to close to where you took the stitch, the original stitch, and you're going to go forward past it. So you can see I have about the same amount of space on either side of my needle. And then I'm going to pull that. I'm going to then go back to where I took the stitch and then past it. So yet again, you can see where my needle enters and exits and where the thread is right now. And I'm going to pull. And I'm going to go back, so you get the idea. I'm doing a very large back stitch currently for you. So if you're doing this stitch correctly, what you should see is almost an unbroken line of thread on the front, and on the back it's going to look like a big old mess. And you can kind of see how messy this back looks. The nice thing about this stitch is that it is stronger than a running stitch. It takes a little bit more time, but it is much stronger. And then when you want to tie this off, you just take one stitch back, take another stitch back in the same location, and then remember you have your loop here that you haven't tightened down. You're going to go through that once, twice, 3 times. Pull. And with that, we're going to clip, and we have a back stitch accomplished. So it's just like the running stitch in the sense that we take a stitch down and up. But this time, with the back stitch, we went all the way back, but with the prick stitch, we're only going to take a small stitch backwards. And then we're going to move forward. So a small stitch back. I'm going to go forward and then take another small stitch back. Move forward. Small stitch back, move forward. And so you're going to continue that all the way down your fabric. And I can kind of show you. On the front, it's going to look like these small stitches that are a little further apart. On the back, there's going to be a lot of extra thread, much like the back stitch. This is a stronger stitch than a running stitch. It's used in many cases to sort of tack down a zipper before you put it in a pair of pants, or to tack. You can also tack down a facing with this. There's a lot of different versatility with it. Once you get to the end, you're going to tie off the same way we've tied off all of our other knots, by taking a stitch backwards, one small stitch, take the same stitch again, and this time when we get to the small loop, we're going to go through that loop 3 times. Once, twice, 3 times, and pull. Clip our thread, and that is the prick stitch. There's so many more stitches to learn. Obviously these are some very basic ones. This is going to be part 1 of a series of stitches that you could use as a costumer. If you enjoyed this, please give it a thumbs up and share it with all your friends. If there are some stitches that you would like to learn or that you've heard of that maybe you don't know much about, please comment down below.